Hello, my name is Lindsay Guichard and I'm an online licensed marriage and family therapist and the creator of thetravelingtherapist.com. This week the speaker talks about emotional hygiene. He shares that he is a twin, and when he was a twin from a very, very young age, he very quickly started to learn the nuances of favoritism. And he says, in his line of work, when he shares that he's a psychologist, people have a tendency to look at him like he's not a real doctor. He says he sees it everywhere. The body to be viewed as more important than the mind. He was visiting some friends and their 5-year-old scraped their leg on a chair, and without even saying a word, he knew to go to the cabinet and to get out a Band-Aid and to put a Band-Aid on his little scratch. We learn these things for personal hygiene, to brush our teeth, to change our clothes. But what do we do for our emotional hygiene? We don't learn much about what to do when we are experiencing failure or rejection or loneliness. These are all very serious psychological injuries that we're going to experience on a pretty regular basis. The speaker shares, feeling depressed? Shake it off. That's what he heard. Can you imagine if someone saw that you had broken your leg and they just said, shake it off? Our speaker says we should be viewing our bodies and our minds as twins. He shares about a story of his own from a very long and sad night when he was in college. His twin and himself decided to go to different colleges, and so they had this weekly check-in where they had the same day, the same time, and this one night his brother wasn't calling him. And the speaker just kept getting more and more concerned. Where is he? Why isn't he calling? He started getting a little upset and angry and feeling rejected, and he started pacing back and forth in his dorm room. He finally went to sleep, feeling very lonely and sad. And then in the morning, he looked over, and he had realized in the act of his pacing, he had kicked the phone off the receiver. He quickly scrambled and put the phone back on the receiver, and within a second, his twin called him. The speaker explained to his twin what had happened, and his twin asked very shockingly, if I wasn't calling you, why didn't you call me? And the speaker said, he was right. I didn't have an answer, but after a while, he found the answer. The answer was loneliness. It creates a deep psychological wound, distorts and scrambles our thinking. It makes us believe that the people around us don't care as much about us as they do. The thinking was, why set yourself up for failure if you're already experiencing a wound that is too much for you to stand? The speaker shares that he was in the grips of real loneliness back then, but he was surrounded by people. He shares loneliness is subjective. We experience it if we feel emotionally disconnected by those around us. If we don't address our loneliness and it becomes chronic loneliness, it increases our likelihood of an early death, our likelihood for high blood pressure. It increases our likelihood for high cholesterol, and it also suppresses our immune system. What do we do when we're experiencing failure? He shared that he was observing a nursery one time with 3 toddlers. They were given the same toy. It was a box that was kind of like a jack-in-the-box. And the first toddler, she shook it around and it wasn't doing anything, and she started to cry. The second toddler saw that the first toddler had no success, so he just looked at the box and started to cry. He didn't even touch the box. The third toddler went to the box and shook it, and she was gonna do everything she possibly could to make something happen. And finally it did. She found this red button and slid it to the left, and out popped a Jack-in-the-Box, and she was so excited. With our first 2 toddlers, the speaker shares that their minds were tricking them into thinking that nothing would ever happen. How does your mind react to failure? If we're not careful, we'll be convinced that we can't succeed. Our minds are a hard thing to change when we become convinced of something. He shares it's very natural to feel demoralized and defeated after we fail. But we must not allow ourselves to be convinced that we can never succeed. We have to fight our feelings of helplessness. We have to gain control of our situation, and we have to break this negative cycle before it even starts. He shares that our minds and our feelings are not the trustworthy friends we thought they were. They're more like a moody friend who's very supportive one minute, and then the next is very unpleasant. What do we do when we are rejected? The speaker shares a story of a woman who was recently divorced after a 10-year marriage, and she finally got the courage to have her first date. And so she got dressed up, she went to a bar, and she met her date at the bar. And after 10 minutes, he got up and said, "I'm just not interested," and left. Devastated, she ran to go call her friend, and her friend on the other line said, "Of course he left. Why would you ever think a guy like that would go for someone like you? You're not very interesting, and you're kind of a loser." Shocking that a friend would say that. The speaker shares, "What if I told you that she didn't call a friend at all? That was the voice in her own head telling her those things." When we've experienced something painful, emotionally painful, we need to treat ourselves like a kind, loving, trustworthy friend. This is going to help us heal. Something else the speaker warns us about is something called rumination. He said a few years ago he experienced the habit of rumination, and he found out that it just takes a 2-minute distraction for the thought that we're cycling over and over, playing a tape over and over again. That thought just takes 2 minutes of distraction for that to stop. So he dedicated himself to a week of practicing the 2-minute distraction whenever that scene started to play in his head. And he said after a week, he had a completely different mindset. I became interested in learning more about emotional hygiene when I was having a tough time passing the last exam for my license for marriage and family therapy. I have created a course for someone who's struggling like I did. This is a course for someone who is very happy with their study prep exam material. They have gone through it, they have done everything suggested, and yet still are having a hard time seeing the password. This course is supplemental to whatever study material you have purchased. This is something that is extra. This is something that is going to be a supplemental support to get you just that much closer to passing your exam. I'm excited to connect with you. I'm excited to share with you my experience and what I have available for you. And we're going to get you the extra support that you need in order to pass. Reach out to me and connect with me. We'll get a 15-minute free Zoom call and we'll talk about what I have and my experience. I'm excited to connect with you, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.